Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on our live show. We're live on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you guys watch your podcast. In just a few moments, we're going to be joined by a very, very brilliant man. He's a Cornell University law professor. He's the founder of equalprotection.org, William Jacobson, a brilliant mind. In fact, one of your guys' favorite on this show. We got a lot of great feedback last time we had him on, so we try to bring him back as often as we possibly can. Rough day today in New York. Hamas agitators just not giving up. They don't realize that the days of law and order in this country are over, especially when it comes to New York. The days of harassing people on college campuses are done. But today they went to a new place, Trump Tower. Check it out.
We're being told they are now making arrests here. We were bringing this to you live. People have stormed into Trump Tower protesting the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University graduate student, former graduate student, who has riled up so much of the anti-Semitism that we've seen, not just on Columbia, but other campuses as well. There's a big dispute going on right now between the Trump administration and Democrats and these supporters of Khalil's who say he has been unfairly detained. But what we're hearing from the administration is Khalil has been at the nexus of this anti-Semitism and the violent protests we've seen on some of these college campuses. You can think about the one building they took over at Columbia months ago and detained. They actually held a janitor hostage. We see the arrest now here at Trump Tower. Can we hear what they're chanting? We don't have the audio. But you can see them getting loud, and you can see the police finally moving in. And one of the things I think that we need to note here is you can see we mentioned before that there were police in the corners. Now we see more police show up, overwhelming force.
You folks get the idea. Finally making arrests, though. When we saw this stuff happening months ago under the Biden regime, nobody did anything about it. We sat there and we were supposed to deal with it. It was the same thing that happened during the summer of love. Now, all of a sudden, Eric Adams seems that he wants to get law and order and justice back to his city. Why do we allow this to happen? Now, you hear people on the left saying, well, it's free speech. Well, it's only free speech when it fits your narrative. At what point does it turn into hate speech? You heard for years the Democrats chastise the Republicans for creating some sort of insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. One event, right? One event that we still don't know everything about. We don't know who were the agitators, who were paid, who wasn't, who came to do harm, who came for freedom, who came to protest an election peacefully and patriotically. We still don't know, but they held it over the Republicans' head. They held thousands of people in jail for years, with some with no trial, some overcharged, lives ruined. Yet these folks think that they can come to the country, a lot of them from out of the country, think they can come to the country and create havoc here. So this man that they're talking about, which we're going to take up with William Jacobson in just a moment here, is now on the precipice of deportation because he was here on a green card status. Take a listen to Secretary of State Marco Rubio when asked about his legal status here in this country.
President Trump appealed to a lot of Americans during his campaign on free speech arguments and not suppressing speech, especially from the government. But your revocation of the green card, to many, is seen as one of the most anti-speech actions a secretary can take with his powers. How do you respond?
Yeah, when you enter this is an important point, and I'm glad you asked this question. When you come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, as on a visitor's visa, okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student, and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out. It's as simple as that. This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with. No one has a right to a student visa. No one has a right to a green card, by the way. So when you apply for a student visa or any visa to enter the United States, we have a right to deny you for virtually any reason. But I think being a supporter of Hamas and coming into our universities and turning them upside down and being complicit in what are clearly crimes of vandalization, complicit in shutting down learning institutions. There are kids at these schools that can't go to class. You pay all this money to these high-priced schools that are supposed to be of great esteem, and you can't even go to class. You're afraid to go to class because these lunatics are running around with covers on their face, screaming terrifying things. If you told us that's what you intended to do when you came to America, we would have never let you in. And if you do it once you get in, we're going to revoke it and kick you out.
The Marxist Dems are taking issue with Marco Rubio. I don't think he could have said it any more concisely, any more eloquently. I want to bring in our guest today, as promised, Cornell University law professor. He's also the founder and president of equalprotection.org, Professor William Jacobson. Professor, it's been a while since we last spoke, but we find ourselves in similar circumstances as the last time we spoke. What's your thoughts on this, that now all of a sudden we don't have a right as a country? Now, it could be open border policies that led us to this, but that we don't have a right as a country to control quality control, I guess you can call it, right? Same thing that every business has, our own country.
Well, we're going to have to get serious about this. And this guy in New York City, Columbia University, is a perfect example of why we need to get serious, because he is devoted his time here to destroying Columbia University, intimidating other students, depriving Americans of their rights. And the question is, can we get him out of the country? And the answer is yes, we can, because he's here initially on a student visa, and then he got a green card. We don't really know exactly what category of green card, but some level of green card. But even with that, he's still a guest in this country. And there are provisions in the law that allow the Secretary of State to remove him if he's deemed a serious threat to our foreign policy. There are also other provisions that if he is part of a group that advocates terrorism and things like that, and the group he reportedly was involved in has endorsed the sort of tactics Hamas used. So there's many grounds to remove him. But my main point is that this is a guy who brought it on himself. He knew he was here on a guest basis, and he nonetheless organized these not really protests, but building takeovers where the buildings were trashed, staff was intimidated, students were harassed. A number of the senators said that when they went to Columbia to meet with students, the students were afraid to walk around campus, the Jewish students with the Jewish star, because of what this group did. So, this is a bad guy who nonetheless will get some level of due process in our immigration system, but we have a right to get rid of him.
Right. And at what point do we draw the line? Like I don't know if you heard my monologue, but the left, they constantly want to talk about they only want to talk about free speech when it benefits them, right? It's usually the Republicans who are on the side of free speech and law and order and truth, justice in the American way. But at what point does free speech turn into hate speech?
Well, hate speech is not like a really illegal concept. I mean,
No.
It's a popular concept. Hate speech is not illegal.
Yes.
But when you're here on a visa and you engage in speech that is supportive of terrorist groups, then you've got a problem. So what the speech he engaged in may be lawful for an American citizen, because in the US, when someone does something, you either prosecute them criminally or you leave them alone. I mean, that's the way the system's supposed to work. But when you're here on a visa, you don't have to actually commit a crime to be deported.
So let me ask you, because you hear from two different sides, and I want to get it from you because I trust you probably more than anyone else that I'm reading it from. What constitutional rights? Because they say in the Constitution, it doesn't say that you're a citizen, that you're afforded to a citizen. They're just afforded to the people. What constitutional rights are green card holders, illegals, anyone who falls under the umbrella of not a citizen or green card, not a U.S. born citizen in this country? What are their afforded rights under the Constitution?
Well, that's not a simple question to answer. I think that people who are here illegally are subject to the immigration laws. And so they have some right to speak, but they do not have right to endorse terrorist groups. If you're here on a visa, they do not have the right to, be part of groups that endorse terrorism. So it's a little bit of a complicated issue. It's not that they don't have any free speech rights, but their free speech rights are limited by the immigration laws.
So, if you're a lawyer prosecuting these cases? What can we do to ensure that this ends? Because the taking over of college campus is absurd. The taking over of the president's home, away from home in New York City and Trump Tower. At what point do we draw the line, and how do we do it to ensure that this doesn't happen again, so that we don't have another summer of love like we had with BLM in 2020?
Well, the first thing is to actually enforce the criminal laws. I mean, the people who took over Trump Tower, which is a private property, engaged in a crime when they did that. Okay. And a bunch of them got arrested, but we know how this goes. We've seen this movie before. They're let go before they even get to the police station, or they're given some ridiculous ticket and it gets dropped. And, that's the problem, is that if some of these people who are engaging in this lawless behavior actually were prosecuted, that would send a message to the rest of society that you can't do that. Okay, that you can protest, but you can't invade somebody's home. You can't invade and take over private property.
Right.
And so that's, I think, what we need. We need some law enforcement, but we're not going to get it in New York City. That's for sure.
What do you think ultimately happens to this guy Mahmoud? Do you think there's grounds to deport him and making examples to let these people know that you're here as a visitor? You're not here because you know what, William, Professor, if I go over to Europe, if I go over to any other country and I do something like that, I'm going to end up, my ass is going to be in jail, and you're not afforded a lawyer. You're not afforded any of that free stuff. People do it because they think you get away with here in America, because we give you a lawyer and we afford you these beautiful prisons. And by beautiful, I mean beautiful compared to any other prison around the world you go to. Not that I've seen them, but I've seen pictures. How do we put an end to it so that it stops?
Yeah, well, I think we have to toughen the border. I mean, part of that's being done, the physical crossing of the border. But he didn't, as far as I know, physically cross the Mexican or Canadian borders illegally. He came here legally, but subject to conditions. Now, one of the things I would not be surprised, I have no information that it will happen, but it would be very common, is he would have had to fill out a whole bunch of forms. And so would his wife, in order to get him that green card. And I presume the government is scrutinizing those forms to see if there were any lies on those forms. I'm not so sure about the green card form, but I do, because that would have probably been filled out by his wife. But I do know that the visa forms typically will ask you, whether you've supported a terrorist group and things like that. And if he lied on any of those, that in and of itself could be ground to revoke his presence in the country. I'm not saying he did, but I'm saying that's the sort of thing. Also, a lot of people are making a big deal saying, oh, well, the provision cited in the appearance notice that DHS gave him only cites the Secretary of State's power to remove somebody from the country if there is a reasonably strong argument it would harm foreign policy. Okay, that's on that form. That doesn't mean they're not going to bring more grounds against him.
Right.
Okay, that's, they put enough on that form to justify bringing him into detention. But my guess is they have a whole lot of more information about him, and at the appropriate time, they'll back that truck up to the immigration court and dump all that evidence about what he's been up to. And I'm guessing that he's been up to a lot worse than we know about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I want to take a quick break here. When we return, I want to take up Columbia University, who's been at the heart of this whole entire thing, is now refusing to help the Department of Homeland Security identify these Hamas sympathizers who support terrorism and terrorizing U.S. citizens here in America. I also want to take up President Trump doing something that should have been done a long time ago, cutting federal funding to these universities who allow this stuff to happen, because it's unjust and it's unallowed and it's un-American. We're coming right back with Professor William Jacobson. Folks, stay with us.
This past year has been one of the hardest in MyPillow's history. It's because of you that we're making it through. My employees and I want to thank you for your continued support by extending our wholesale prices on classic MyPillows. Get standard classic MyPillows only $14.98. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.98. But it gets even better. Upgrade to a queen size MyPillow for just $18.98. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows $29.98 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of these wholesale prices, including my standard size MyPillow, originally $49.98, now only $14.98. Queens $18.98, Kings only $1 more. Not only that, order $75 or more, ship absolutely free. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
Folks, we're back with Cornell University Law Professor William Jacobson. He's also the founder of equalrightsprotection.org. We're going to talk about his work in just a few moments. Before we get to that, I want to turn to Columbia University, who's been at the heart of this issue, the heart of this fellow Mahmoud and all the problems he's caused. Caroline Levitt said the Department of Homeland Security is using intelligence to identify individuals on our college campuses who have engaged in such behavior and activity, but Columbia University won't identify who did it. Now, it's mind-blowing to me because they just took over their university. They held their janitor hostage. They destroyed their campus that they go to school at, and now the university's protecting them. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's two issues there. One, are they impeding immigration enforcement? And the standard that colleges have done and cities have done is say, we're just not going to do anything. We have no affirmative duty to actually take action for you. So they're probably safe there from the criminal laws, as opposed to actively interfering in an investigation. But they depend on federal funding. And I don't know if there's a provision in the federal funding that says you must cooperate, but that's something to be looked at. So they're putting their federal funding at risk. Columbia just lost $400 million in grants from the US government. I believe, I might be wrong on this number. I saw someplace they get like $5 billion a year or some crazy number. Maybe it's $2 billion or whatever, but a very big number. Will the government come in and say, okay, you're not going to give us that information. We're not going to give you money.
Yeah.
Okay. And these schools are heavily dependent on federal funding to a greater extent than anybody realizes. Could Columbia, in order to not reveal the names of these students, will they take a $2, $3, $4 billion hit? There was a case a couple of decades ago involving what's called the Solomon Amendment. Solomon Amendment said that if a school refuses to allow military recruiters on the same basis they allow other recruiters, then you lose your federal funding. Harvard Law School refused to allow the JAG Corps to interview because of the don't ask, don't tell policy. And it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, hey, you take federal money, you take it on condition. And when faced with the choice of losing $400 million in federal funding, this is like 20 years ago, or giving up on the don't ask, don't tell, Harvard gave in.
Yeah, the thing that's also mind-blowing to me is why we're doing this. Why are we paying? By the way, the other schools that the Trump Justice Department are investigating is George Washington University in D.C., Harvard University, Johns Hopkins University, NYU, Northwestern, University of California, Los Angeles, the University of California, Berkeley, the University of Minnesota, and the University of Southern California. I think there's far more.
Johns Hopkins, it was reported in the Wall Street Journal this morning, just got $800 million in funding pulled from them.
So why are we funding? I understand the whole government. Why are we funding? This is from a whole, not even an immigration aspect, but why are we funding schools to send foreigners who come here and get grants against our own American children who we're sending to school whose parents are breaking their backs to pay for their kids, yet we're paying for foreigners to come to school here in America? Am I right or wrong about that?
Well, I don't know that we're paying for them to come here. I mean, a lot of the foreigners, and the reason they're so attractive to the schools is that a lot of them pay full freight, okay? They either get money from their government abroad or they get from families, and they come here and they pay the full tuition. They don't look for financial aid and they don't get it. So I don't know that foreigners are getting aid from our government as part of these grants. But I think the bigger question is the whole grant system with regard to universities is a good example of something that started off as a good thing, but has now grown so much that it's become preposterous in many cases. Yes, we do want to fund research. We do want to fund all of that. But now you've got grants in the hundreds of millions, maybe even billions, going to crazy stuff, okay? All the things that have been revealed about USAID going to non-government, quote unquote, non-governmental organizations to fund very bizarre stuff. And the same thing happens on campuses. National Endowment for the Arts, other things are funding, DEI activities. And the question is, this started off as a good thing. And you know what? Now the legitimate researchers are going to suffer because when the money gets pulled, it gets pulled across the board.
Yeah, by paying these kids to come here, what I meant by that is they're afforded where these grants go. These grants go to fix buildings. They go to advance food. They go to do all types of different things across campuses, and we're competing against ourselves. Do you think the pulling of this federal money and the crackdown on green cards and visas will start to maybe slow down the inflow of foreigners in our schooling system? I mean, we have a problem putting Americans in jobs as it is, yet we're bringing massive amounts of people from other countries to come here and compete against our American children who go to schools. It's a massive disadvantage. Do you see that changing?
Well, I think there will be an adjustment. And, it's true. Most of the foreign students who come here for good reasons. Okay. But I read a statistic, I believe it's to be true, that Colombia is more than half foreign students. When you bring in that inflow of foreign students, particularly from countries, this guy's an Algerian citizen who was born in Syria, and you don't vet them at all, you're going to have problems. We've seen this movie before, okay? People from certain countries need to be vetted to make sure they don't have terrorist ties and things like that. That's not a new concept. That's a concept that's been around for a very long time. It's why with some countries, you can basically come here as a visitor with no visa, and other countries you require more stringent, review. And I think there will be a shift, and the universities are going to really have to rearrange their priorities. If you want to continue the medical research and the bio research and all that, and your federal funding is down, maybe you get rid of the gender studies department or gender study scholarships, stuff that really doesn't contribute anything to anything. So there's going to be, schools are going to have to make some choices because they're not going to have the money they used to have.
Now, what about the teachers and the professors who are in these universities? Because this is something you would be privy to. It seems like as years have gone on, they're completely radicalized. These people cave to the nonsense. And it's, what the crazy part is, it's even some of these Jewish professors who are like on board with these Hamas terrorists. Like, where are they recruiting them from now versus when you entered the law school education system?
I was in private law practice for 22 years before joining Cornell 17 or so years ago. Time flies. Yeah. Let's say 17 years. Could be 18, could be 16. I don't know.
Or 20.
But a long time ago. But even then, I was totally non-political. I never would have been hired had I been out as a conservative. So the reality is probably going back to the early 90s, maybe a little earlier, some people would say. It's been exceedingly difficult to get hired in higher ed as a conservative. Not impossible, but difficult. And the higher ranked school you go to, the more difficult it is. And so what you have is the people who are kind of mainstream are aging out. Okay. I'm 65. Of the quote unquote centrist conservative professors on campus, I'm probably the youngest. Okay. And there was a study 3 years ago, I think it was, of how professors identify themselves and liberal versus conservative. And if you go back 20 years, it was 60-40 liberal to conservative, which means it was balanced, but leaned left. Academia is always leaned left. Now it's something like 28-1 liberal to conservative. And if you look at the youngest cohort, the ones who've been 10 years or fewer in academia, it's 40-1. It's almost impossible to be hired as a conservative. Not impossible, but almost impossible.
You know, Lou, the great Lou Dobbs used to try to get me all the time from the day I started working for him. Maybe after the first week, he used to beg me, please go back to school. Please go back to school. Become a lawyer. Please become a lawyer. Please become. And I'd say to him, I'd say, Lou, you know, the only way I'd go back to law school is if I went to a top 10 school. And I said, even then, I'd have a very tough time, and not with the schoolwork, but I'd have a tough time dealing with idiot professors, people who are trying to brainwash me, people who are trying to indoctrinate me. I wouldn't put up with it. I simply wouldn't put up with it. What is it like for the students? I mean, do you bring politics into the classroom? What is it like for you knowing that probably 99% of your students are Marxist leftists?
Well, I don't think that might be true at some places. Not my
Oh, I'm
students.
just being
Okay? I don't
facetious.
talk politics with them. I teach investment law. I stay away from politics. I don't think it's fair when professors do that. They love to talk about power imbalances, you know, on campuses. Well, it's a power imbalance between a professor and a student. I get to grade them. They don't get to grade me. I think it's almost bullying to bring when a professor brings politics into the classroom. So I don't do it at all. My students, I don't know what most of them think, but you know, I'm in a law school that's I would say overall a fairly moderate law school. There are other law schools that are much more radicalized. My students want to graduate for the most part, want to get a job at a big law firm, making big money, right? You know, the reality is that their first year out of law school, they're making more than I am because they go to some big New York law firm that's paying first-year associates $250,000 a year or something like that. They're very career and professional oriented, but I keep it out. I have heard other things. The undergrad level at Cornell is much more political, as well as some of the other graduate departments. But you know, it's a problem because a lot of students, even in my moderate law school, have confided in me over the years. They're just afraid to talk up and say anything that might be deemed not liberal. I won't even say conservative, but not left wing, and they feel that level of intimidation. So it's a real problem, and I think professors have done themselves a lot of harm by trying to force their views onto students.
Yeah, you know, you've got me sold. I don't think I'll ever make it to law school. I just, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to sit there honestly and let somebody sit there and be maniacal and be deceptive. When I was in college, it was the 2016, 2015 era was when President Trump was running for office, and I walked around with my Trump hat on because I didn't care. And now it's like you'll get egged, you'll be destroyed. I mean, look what they're doing to Elon Musk and his car dealerships and his cars and anyone who owns them. The way I see it, and tell me if I'm wrong on this. How it was when you were, and you just almost proved my point, how it was when you became a professor was you worked in the private sector, and there was the same thing. I know this from my father who was in finance his whole life. You worked in private sector as a high-level person, law firm, bank, whatever it was. You retired, and then you taught to give back to the students. You taught to give back to society. The way I see it now is people are coming out of school to then go back into academia right away to become teachers. Do you see a similar streamline?
Yeah, I think people should live a little bit in the real world. I think people should, you know, for 22 years, I mean, not my earliest years, but for most of my career, I had to meet a payroll. Okay.
Right.
I was the boss. Okay. I was
Right.
the business owner, and I was the last one to get paid. Okay.
Right.
The IRS got paid. The employees got paid first. The IRS got paid second. The landlord got paid third. And only when we'd gone through all of those things, whatever was left was for me. And if you haven't lived that and you don't understand those economics, you know, you have this dream reality that money just grows on trees and we can get whatever we want as long as the government just pays for it and it's cost free. And if you've lived in the real world, so I think, you know, schools would do very well to bring in as part of their hiring process people who have done something else other than study.
Yeah, it does good for everybody. Like you said, everyone should experience. It's the same thing with politicians. There's people who've only had political jobs. These people have never had a real job in their life. Not that they're making a ton of money, but they get all this influence and they come out and they make even more money and they trade stocks and all that good stuff. And it's literally like you've never lived in the real world. You've never faced a real world society or anything like that. I want to take a quick break here. By the way, we have a chat. Someone said, I saw a sticker on a Tesla. Quote, I bought this car before Elon went insane. Imagine that. The world's smartest man, in my opinion, the world's richest man. That's not my opinion. That's fact. and he's being tortured. When we come back, I want to take up your lawsuit against the university in Michigan. I also want to take up something we spoke about last time, and I think I had voiced my concerns to you about this very issue, birthright citizenship. I want to take that up on the other side of this quick break. We're coming right back with Professor William Jacobson. Folks, stay with us.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Folks, we're back with Professor William Jacobson. Thank you for staying with us for that short break. I want to turn to, before we get to birthright citizenship and these lawless judges who somehow think that they're judge, jury, and verdict, your lawsuit against a university in Michigan and their scholarship program, of course, tailoring to anybody but the normal person.
Yeah, well, we just filed a civil rights complaint against Calvin University in Michigan because we found there 65 discriminatory scholarships. At the Equal Protection Project, which is equalprotect.org, we have filed against over 60 colleges and universities, but we've never found 65 in one place. And some of these are really crazy scholarships, like, you know, they will flip years. One year it'll be a white person, next year it'll be a black person. Or there's one scholarship for, transracial adoptees, okay? So you can only apply if you are an adopted person, which we, of course, love that, and you are transracial, whatever that means. I guess they meant biracial. And just very bizarre, very bizarre configurations that we don't see. Most of what we see in most schools is scholarships or programs only open to quote unquote BIPOC students. Okay, that's a well-known term, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And those are unlawful. But we also, in this one, very specific, very bizarre. And Calvin is a small school. I think it's only 3,000 or 4,000 students. It's a Christian school or related to one of the Christian denominations. I'm not sure which one. And it was just very strange. So we filed that last night with the Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Education, which has been severely cut back, but we're really hoping that they will take action on this. We just got 3 letters in today on other cases of ours that they're opening them for investigation. So they're actually doing stuff there. They've got half the staff, but they're doing more stuff in one day than they usually do in a month. 3. So we're hoping they'll be active, because what people need to understand, there's a little bit of a tension between the Trump administration wanting to scale back the Department of Education at the same time that they want to stop discrimination done in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you're going to achieve that goal of ending DEI discrimination, you need an enforcement mechanism. So we're hoping that the streamlined Office for Civil Rights will be more effective than the larger Office for Civil Rights. And I guess that's the whole point of DOJ and things like that, is that you can do even a better job with fewer people sitting around if you keep the right people. And that's kind of the Twitter model. When, Musk bought Twitter, he laid off like 70% of the people and nobody noticed. It didn't make a difference. And so I think that's it. And so a hopeful sign, breaking news here, that we in the first day after the reconfiguration, they seem to be very active.
Going back to the private sector thing, I worked in the private sector my whole life. But my whole life, I mean, the 15 years or so that I've been working. And I mean, you see so many people in organizations as you're sitting there working your butt off, sitting on their lazy butts, and you look at them and you say, this place would probably run without you, and it would probably run better without you. And the whole embarrassing thing about Doge, Professor, is that Elon Musk has like 5 or 10 20-year-old kids, probably never went to college, which I don't think is necessarily a big deal. If you're smart, you're smart, right? Who never went to college, who have uncovered more in this federal government as it pertains to waste, fraud, and abuse than we've ever seen in our lifetime. They want to go in the IRS, and people are going absolutely nuts. And it's Democrats because I think they're probably a little nervous on what they're going to find in there. Imagine that 20-year-old kids finding this much waste, fraud, and abuse. But then on the other end, you've got judges who think that they're judge, jury, and verdict, and that they call the shots on everything, and they have free will and free reign to do whatever the hell they want. How do we allow this to happen? I mean, what happens if Donald Trump, recently we saw USAID, these people be laid off, these new folks, and a judge comes back and says, well, you can't fire them because they were probationary. Since when are workers just protected for absolutely no reason? I thought we were, all at will employees, and we can be fired at any time for any reason they want.
Well, I mean, the argument is that those employees, some of whom are union members, might have some job protections, but that's not really the issue. The issue is the role of the federal judiciary. Okay, and we've seen some pretty egregious cases since Trump took office, and there are over 100 cases filed against his administration.
That's it?
Like I checked, it was over 100. A very highly organized lawfare. New York Times wrote about it last November. 800 lawyers and 40 different companies and firms prepared to swamp Trump administration in lawsuits. And the federal judges do have the right to determine people's rights and whether your rights have been violated. That's not new, but a lot of them have gone a lot further and are really, in my view, and I think the Supreme Court ultimately in its view, are exceeding the constitutional boundaries. They are making policy decisions for the executive branch. And in our separation of powers, the judiciary may get to determine rights, but they don't get to make policy decisions. And a lot of what's been happening about who you can hire, who you can fire, who you can give information to, what the Doge people can look at, what they can't look at. These are, in most cases, really policy decisions. And the judges have, many of them, not all, there are many who have said, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do this. Okay. And I think ultimately Trump will prevail on the vast majority of these lawsuits. But the way it works is they go in, hair on fire, judge, end of the world, and the judge gives them a temporary restraining order, which is very hard to appeal. And so for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they get their way. But what we're seeing in most of these cases, as they work their way up in the system, they're getting reversed or stayed or stricken. So he will prevail on most of them, but we have a real problem with the federal judiciary going too far.
And I'll give you my insight on why I believe that is. Donald Trump had 4 years to prepare for coming back to office. He had guys like Stephen Miller, who is very, very smart human being, drafting up a lot of his legislation. And this was maybe even before he won the White House. I'm not 100% sure that's true, but I have to assume guys like Stephen Miller and his think tank were, drafting legislation way before President Trump took office. And they did it, I think, in a foolproof way, which is why you're not hearing. You maybe hear about 4 or 5 cases every now and then, but you haven't heard about these 100 cases. And Donald Trump, as you said, prevail. I think he's won the most of them that have come out in the public domain. My question to you is, why is it that we constantly see these same judges time and time again? Beryl Howell from D.C., Tanya Chutkin, the judge that was on the Donald Trump documents case. It's these J6 attorneys. It's like the same 4 or 5 attorneys that you constantly see popping up again in these same cases that have something to do with Donald Trump. How is that possible?
Well, because the other side is forum shopping, the opponents of the Trump administration. DC is a different issue, the DC District Court, because where it's located, it's the natural place for a lot of things challenging government action. But a lot of what they've been doing is going to jurisdictions where a high percentage, if not all of the judges, were nominated by Democrat senators and Democrat presidents. So they filed a big case in Rhode Island. You don't get more blue than Rhode Island. They filed a couple of big cases in Massachusetts. They have so they file in jurisdiction where there's a high likelihood they are going to get a more favorable judge, a Biden appointee, that sort of thing. DC court is a problem because so much federal litigation against the government, that is an appropriate venue for it, place for it. But that is, again, a location where there are a lot of Biden judges. The one who ruled, it might be in the case you referenced earlier, but the one who ruled that they had to pay $2 billion in invoices by midnight, okay?
Yeah.
Remember that case?
Yeah.
Went up to the Supreme Court and they issued a stay, and then it get sent back down. That guy shouldn't even be on the bench. Thank you, Republicans. He was one of, if not the last Biden appointees. He was confirmed in November after the election because Senator Braun from Indiana didn't show up to vote no.
Yeah.
Okay. It would have been a 50-50 split, Judge Ali. It would have been a 50-50 split. Kamala was no place to be found over,
Hawaii.
after the election. They would have had, I won't even make jokes about where she might have been, but she was no place to be found.
Hawaii.
Yeah. And so it would have been a 50-50 deadlock. But Senator Braun didn't show up to vote. He got through 50-49, and now he's creating all this havoc in these cases. And he has pretty much, I won't say he's been reversed by the Supreme Court, but they sent it back to him with instructions to do better, basically. But that's what we're going to face. There's going to be a lot of litigation in DC. There are a lot of Biden appointees in DC District Court, and it's the reality we face.
What happened in 2020 when President Trump and his team were filing all these legal cases against election fraud and stuff like that? You constantly had cases thrown out for standing. You don't have standing. You don't have standing. You don't have standing. Why is it that these people can go to any court they want and all of a sudden they have standing?
Well, a lot of them don't, and the judges have just completely disregarded that, and I think they're going to lose on appeal. I think a lot of these cases brought by the unions, brought by the states, brought by different organizations, they don't have standing, and the district courts have not been vigilant like they are in other cases. And I think they're going to lose on appeal because there's nothing appeals courts love doing more than tossing cases on standing, including the Supreme Court. And so I think a lot of these things are going to go away just on the basis you mentioned.
It's rules for thee, but not for me. And nobody says a word about it. I haven't heard anybody say a word about it. I'm not saying I'm the first one, but from in the mainstream media, I haven't heard anyone saying, where's the standing? In 2020, everyone's like, oh, Donald Trump has couldn't bring the case. He has no standing. Oh, look, there's no fraud. No, it's because of this BS thing that there's no standing. And that means you have no right to bring the case there. I want to turn to, before we wrap up here, the whole birthright citizenship thing. And last time we spoke, I think we got into this a little bit. And I had expressed to you that I have a feeling the courts and the Supreme Court are somehow going to get involved in this because there's nothing in the Constitution about it. Where are we at right now as Donald Trump now is going to the Supreme Court and says, these people have no right to be here?
Well, that's an issue. So I think the First Circuit, which is New England, basically, Court of Appeals, upheld the lower court finding injunction against birthright citizenship. So it's now primed to go to the Supreme Court. And I think they will probably take it. How they'll rule, I think we may have talked about this last time. I don't think it's as open and shut as a lot of people are saying. I think if you had to place a money bet, I think the Supreme Court probably will uphold the birthright citizenship doctrine, but I'm not positive of it, and it's not a guarantee. It's not as simple an issue as people are claiming. And if you have originalists on the court, if you have justices, which we do, at least some of them, not 6 of them, but some of them, who will look into what the initial meaning was, I think you may come up with a ruling that the language people cite about, from the 14th Amendment for birthright citizen, is not what was intended. It was never intended to confer citizenship upon people in the country illegally. Okay. Right. And there is no high-level court, meaning Supreme Court, or I think even Court of Appeals, not sure about that. But the Supreme Court has never held that someone born in this country to people who are here illegally is an automatic citizen.
Right.
They have held that people who are born here to permanent residence, so people in the country lawfully,
Right.
gain citizenship. So it's not open and shut, and I think we're primed to get there, and it will be an legal earthquake. And it's not like the abortion one where they're actually having to overrule a prior decision.
Yeah.
There is no prior Supreme Court decision
That's
that they have to overrule.
Right. This will be a new decision that we'll live by. And I mean, I share your pessimism in some of the ways we've seen someone like Amy Coney Barrett ruling recently. Total disgrace, in my opinion, and total disappointment. Not a constitutionalist, I think, by any means. Donald Trump got 1 out of 3. Neil Gorsuch, who I think really knows what he's doing and really knows the Constitution. You got John Roberts on there, completely lost, I think. And you've got Brett Kavanaugh, who votes whatever way the wind is blowing that day. The other issue we have, too, is DACA. Do you think we finally get a ruling on DACA?
Yeah, I'm not sure where that is, if that's at the Supreme Court or not. There have been courts that have ruled it unlawful. I don't know if that's going back to the Supreme Court. One of the problems with the federal government is that once you implement something, it's very hard to get rid of it. And people don't realize DACA is not a law, okay?
Right.
It's not even an executive order. It was a memo in the Obama executive department, okay? And in Trump 1, he tried to get rid of it, and the courts ruled you didn't get rid of it the right way. And it's been percolating in litigation, and we do now have some court rulings that the president, by a memorandum, in that case Obama, can't just change the immigration laws, okay? And so I think it's primed. I don't know where it is in terms of going back to the Supreme Court, but I think we're near the end of DACA.
So if you can do it with a memo, why can't you undo it with a memo?
Well, that's the whole point. That's right. And that's what really confounded things. And that's where there's this thing called the Administrative Procedures Act, and you got to do it the right way. I don't understand all the intricacies of it, but that's where Trump lost the first time around, is on the Administrative Procedures Act.
Well, listen, we overturned Roe v. Wade and then, sent that back to the states. This is, I think, a lot smaller than that. This is something only in the last, when did Obama do it? Maybe less than 10 years ago, right? It has to be something like that.
Probably approaching 15 years ago. I mean,
yeah. So, I mean, something that's been, I guess, law a lot shorter than Roe v. Wade, and they had no problem overturning that, but I'm a little bit nervous. That just brought something to my mind as we were talking about Kamala Harris and the Senate and that vote, which I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the auto pen scandal with Joe Biden. He signs all these pardons while he's in St. Croix on vacation golfing, signed on the 22nd, I think, of June 20, whatever the year was, says that they were signed in the District of Columbia. We know he wasn't there. Does this pose any issues for some things that were signed with this auto pen?
Well, it might. I mean, were they valid presidential proclamations? If it hadn't been the auto signature, and I don't know what the law is on that auto signature, if using it but legally is the equivalent of the president signing it. So I just don't know, and I don't want to speculate how this will come out, but it's a very interesting question. If the president doesn't actually sign it, and the document says it was signed in a place where he wasn't at that time,
right,
is it valid? I think that's a legitimate question.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I had to get that off my chest because President Trump commented on it today, and I'm just curious what the hell's going on with Joe Biden and what's going on. Nobody's heard from him. You got the last word here before we wrap up.
Interesting times. Thank you for having me back. I always like coming on this show. I liked it when it was Lou, and I like it when it's you, and that we get enough time to actually talk about things in depth. So thanks for having me on again.
I appreciate it, and you're always welcome back here, anytime you want. I think you're one of the most brilliant legal minds out there, and you always have great insights on things that are shaping our economy and shaping our world. So you're always welcome back here as often as you'd like to come back.
Great. Thank
Professor
you.
William Jacobson. You guys can check out his website, equalprotect.org. Professor, come back soon.
Thank you.
folks, as I said, you can check him out, equalprotect.org. Brilliant legal mind, a great American. Doesn't have it easy, folks, teaching at a school that's only partially, I guess, from the sounds of it, partially indoctrinated by these Marxists that are trying to take over our world, take over our society. Before we go, speaking of Marxists, James Carville, who's losing his mind. The guy's absolutely losing it. I don't know if he's got dementia. I don't know, but he's losing his damn mind. On a podcast, I think with Chris Cuomo this week, had some things to say about Donald Trump. Now, this is a man who said Donald Trump was going to lose the election. He said, again, Donald Trump was going to lose, which he said the first two times. I guess he was partially right in 2020 because the election was stolen. Said Donald Trump's approval ratings going through the floor. Our good friends at Rasmussen, Mark Mitchell, tell us otherwise. His approval rating continues to skyrocket. But he's now got a new prediction. President Trump has syphilis. I'm joking. Take a listen to this unhinged lunatic, please.
What are you going for here with the I'm worried that Trump has syphilis?
Well, okay. First of all, there's something wrong with him. That's pretty clear. That meeting in the Oval Office was a significant deterioration. Secondly, we do know that he did have red splotches on his hand, which, it could be an indication of syphilis. But the other thing that we know that we had to talk about, on January the 17th, 2017, Keith Schiller and two other goons broke into his doctor's office, Dr. Bornstein, and confiscated his health records. We have never seen them. We don't know what's in it. So if I take, of course, I'm speculating.
Yes.
But if he had an enlarged prostate or had a precancerous skin lesion, you wouldn't steal your medical records, would you? You wouldn't break into your internist and send people to confiscate your medical records. So unlike people who say, well, I'm just asking questions.
No, you're not.
Well, of course I am. There's some deterioration in him. He did have skin splotches. He did confiscate his medical records. Maybe there's a benign explanation. I don't know. And we did watch a event unlike anything we've ever seen in American history in the Oval Office. And so people can say, well, that just kind of happened, and say, let's be fair about it. People can say, there's something really fundamentally wrong here.
Folks, I'm sorry, but I had to watch all 2 minutes of that today. So it's only fair that I share that with you and you guys get to wallow in the joy with me. These people are losing it. It's not just him. It's the Marxist Dem Party. I mean, what is going on with these people? What is in the water that they just have this derangement? We all put up with Joe Biden for 4 years. We couldn't stand him. But you know what? We came out here, Lou Dobbs and I, and we told the news every single night with our opinion, our spin on the news, not our spin on the news, but our spin on what we're thinking, our logical thinking. And if Joe Biden did something right, we reported on it as it was. But you never heard us, coming out here saying Joe Biden had syphilis. Dementia, yes, but that wasn't just us saying it. This was medical doctors saying it. People who worked with him, people who are around him. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, told us at one point he'd sit in a meeting with Joe Biden, and the man didn't know what was going on. He had no cards to talk to everybody. Didn't know what the hell was going on. But you've got Carville out here accusing President Trump of syphilis. It's truly remarkable times that we're in. Chuck Schumer playing a big tough guy battle for the spending bill, which he says is not going to pass because the Republicans don't have the votes. Now, Rand Paul had said he's not going to vote for it, and you need 60 votes because of the filibuster rule to invoke cloture on the vote. So they don't have it in that sense. You need, I believe, 8 Democrats in order to invoke cloture. So Chuck Schumer comes out this week and says, we're not supporting it. So it's essentially his shutdown if it does happen. Now, the government shuts down tomorrow at midnight if it winds up happening. It's now being reported that Chuck Schumer was just talking tough and that they're actually going to fund the government through September 30th with the continuing resolution. But just sick. I mean, the Democrats, this will be the first time, by the way, in a long time where the Republicans may finally win a battle on the budget and win a battle against the Democrats on anything, because time and time again, the Republicans got beat over the head. They continue to get beat over the head by the Marxist Dems. And I say this all the time. It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they work harder. It's just because the Republicans are feckless. They're always scared of the optics on how things are going to lose. And they've always caved. And we're always scared to shut down the government. And they settle for whatever the Marxist Dems wanted, give them whatever they wanted just to not shut down the government. And it relates to what we're seeing today with the stock market. If you joined us yesterday for our show, I talked a lot about this. We're going through growing pains right now. The fight that Donald Trump has taken to these countries, to Europe, to Canada, is something that we've needed. There's no reason that America should be importing more than we're exporting. We're a consumption economy? No. Haiti's a consumption economy. Dominican Republic is a consumption economy. Bahamas is a consumption economy. America should not be a consumption economy. There's no way that we should have, as I said, be importing more than we're exporting and have a trade deficit for the last 50 years. It makes zero sense. This is America, the largest GDP in the world, yet we have a trade deficit 4 times larger. It's running over $1 trillion. Howard Lutnick says close to $2 trillion. We should not have a trade deficit 4 times larger than the second biggest GDP, which is China. It shouldn't be like that. America is innovators. The biggest things that America imports is machinery and equipment and computers. It makes up 30% of America's imports. Go to the store, folks. Buy a John Deere. Spend the extra $500, $1,000, whatever it is, to support the American economy, to support the American job. Buy Milwaukee tools that are made here in America. That's what's really going to turn around this economy. That's what's going to slow down inflation, by putting more money back into the pockets of the average American, the blue-collar American who built up our country, who built up our society, who continue to do so every day. I said it yesterday, I said it the day before, and I'll continue to say it. The mechanic, the plumber, the electrician, those are all people that we can't live without. Yeah, we can't live without doctors. We could probably live without lawyers and politicians. We'd probably have a better society. But those are people we can't live without. We can't get through our everyday lives without mechanics, without plumbers, without HVAC technicians, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technicians. That's what this whole fight is about. That's why the economy or the stock market is reacting to it. The stock market's not reacting to President Trump putting tariffs as much as they're reacting to President Trump wanting to cut $1 trillion out of the deficit, $1 trillion out of the GDP. That's what they're reacting to. But the mainstream media, the leftists, Fox News, will give them the benefit of the doubt. They don't have anybody on air smart enough to relay that to you because they really don't understand what's going on. But that's why we're seeing a massive market shift. Yeah, the tariffs are playing a small part, but it was baked into the cake. President Trump has been telling us since November, from the day he announced he was running for president again, that he was going to tariff these nations for taking advantage of America. It's not new news. There's nothing new about it. What's new news is the uncovering of fraud, waste, and abuse that Elon Musk has uncovered. Probably trillions of dollars. We've only uncovered, I think, low in the billions. It's probably trillions of dollars. Now, why is that important? Because you constantly hear about entitlement reforms, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, that we need to reform them because that's where we're spending most of our money. Well, if we can start cutting trillions of dollars of wasteful spending, don't you think that helps entitlements? Don't you think that we'll be able to maybe not have to go in and touch Social Security for these people who've worked their whole lives contributing to it, or the people who are in Medicaid? Don't you think? So if you sit there and you think about it, that's why the Marxist Dems are so upset. That's why they're going insane of the proposition that we may not have to fix entitlements. It's the same thing with the border, folks. If you fix the border issue and you secure the border, what are you going to run on in 4 years? What are you going to run on in 2 years? What are you going to run on in 6 years? You can't go out and say, I'm going to go fix the border because it's fixed. That's why Donald Trump is such a threat to these people. That's why he's such a threat to the establishment. Because if he drains the swamp, as Kelly Song is saying in the chat right now, if he fixes these issues in Washington, D.C., and he gets this thing running like a locomotive train, what are our politicians going to run on? What are they going to tell their voters we're going to fix? Because there'll be nothing to fix at that point. Think about it. All I'm going to ask you to do is think about it and look at the numbers. Once we start onshoring jobs back here in America, and we're already seeing it happen by the day, we're seeing trillions of dollars in investments coming back to America. The idea of tariffs is not to cripple our economy, and it's not to cripple Canada, it's not to cripple Mexico. It's for America to start onshoring things that we sent offshore that we can bring back to America. Why are we building cars in Mexico and shipping them over the border and assembling them here? Why can't we just build the whole thing here? Yes, it'll cost a little bit more. But you know what? These automakers and all these people are making plenty of money where they could afford to pay these guys an extra $5 an hour, an extra $10 an hour. Figure it out. Cut your costs somewhere else. Don't cut it on the backs of the American people. And I think if President Trump and his team and these private companies relay the messaging to people that way, if these private companies come out and say Jeep, I recently bought a Jeep Wrangler, and parts of it are assembled in Mexico. But if Jeep comes out and says to the consumer, listen, it used to be assembled in Mexico, it's an extra 1%, it's an extra 2%, but it was assembled here in America. It was made here in America. Every part was touched by an American in a manufacturer here in America. I would have no problem paying an extra 1%. You know why? Or 2% or 3%. Because I don't buy a car every year. I don't buy a car every 6 months. We buy cars every 4 or 5 years or whatever. Or you lease a car every 4 or 5 years. So if you explain it to the American person that way, the average person is not going to mind paying an extra little bit to know that they're putting money back into the pockets. Blue collar workers, when they go to the stores and buy tools, it's the same thing with them. They're buying things to put money back in the pockets of the American people. And if the messaging is there and it's explained to the voter and it's explained to the person that way, I don't think you have an issue. Now, I don't know what the percentage raise is going to be. Nobody really knows. It's probably going to be more expensive because it's made here in America with American labor, but that's fine because we're employing our own people. We're employing our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, the future of America. And you know what? In the long run, as I've said throughout the shows this week, America is going to be far better off when we could bring jobs back. You guys remember what happened. And this is all off the cuff, by the way. This is not rehearsed or anything like that. I'm just giving you my opinion on the way I see it. And I think the average American sees it. You guys remember what happened during COVID when we couldn't get gowns. We couldn't get pharmaceuticals. We couldn't get masks because China, or as President Trump likes to call them, China, held it over our heads. They wouldn't send masks. They wouldn't send gowns. Then we couldn't get our pharmaceuticals because they're made in India. They're made in China. Over 85% of our pharmaceuticals. Why can't we onshore that back into America? I mean, that in itself is absurd to even think about, that we have to rely on two adversaries, possibly China and India, for life-saving pharmaceuticals. Who put us in that position in the first place? Which president was it? Because it's now Donald Trump's job to get us out of it, and he has no problem. He has no problem taking the hits. He has no problem with the stock market taking a momentary hit to onshore things back to America, to get our Americans back to work. It's common sense, folks. It really is common sense. Think about that next time you go to the store and you go to buy something, where it's made. I try to, as much as I possibly can, buy things that are made here in America. Now, there's some things that we'll never be able to make here in America, such as textiles. Your suits you get in Italy, or your dress shirts you get in Italy, and T-shirts are made in Taiwan or Thailand or China or wherever they make them. There's things like that that are never going to be made back here in America because it'll be far too expensive, and I understand that. But if we can bring back 50% of what we're making overseas, we'll be better off. The American consumer will be better off. We'll all be far better off. But you need to think about that as you go to the stores. A spot of shade. The higher prices of steel and aluminum are offset by the lower taxes that the corporations will pay, so you won't see a rise in car manufacturing price. You're absolutely right. The problem is you also have here in America, you have greedy corporations, you have greedy companies, and it's the same reason I use this example all the time. Here in New York City, if you go to a restaurant and you get a Caesar salad, it shouldn't be $15 or $20 to get a Caesar salad. A head of romaine, now I understand your overhead cost. A head of romaine at wholesale prices, say 75 cents with the portion that you're getting. The cost to make the sauce is, say another, we'll be conservative, 75 cents. You're at $1.50. Now you do your labor costs and you owe that guy in the kitchen $1 for making it. Okay. So you're at $2.50 now. We'll round it up to $3 for electricity for making that Caesar salad. So you got $3. Okay. You're entitled to make 100%. You're entitled to make 200%, but charging $15 or $20 for that salad, there's no justification. So you're going to have price gougers. I mean, you have them everywhere, in every single industry. But as a Spot of Shade said in the Rumble chat, the fair portion of it will offset by the tax cuts that President Trump is going to give to corporations. You guys heard this week, President Trump wants to cut the income tax on people making under $150,000 a year. Okay. That's money that's going to come back into the economy. If you put more money in the pockets of the people under a stable economy. Now, in the economic issues we're in right now, which is why I don't agree with the $5,000 Doge checks. If you give somebody money, they're probably not going to put it back in the economy. They're maybe going to save it or spend it on something stupid, depending on who you're giving it to. But once you start, getting this economy back on track, and the news of the week is that Joe Biden spent an extra few $100 billion into the economy before he left office as an added stimulus to knowing that Donald Trump was eventually going to have to cut it and harm the economy, which is maybe also what we're seeing right now with this tumultuous markets. So everything's eventually going to offset. If you take the payroll tax away from the guy making 150 grand a year, he's going to put the money back into the economy. You'll get the money that way. You'll get the money on tariffs. It's very simple. If these countries don't want tariffs on themselves, take the tariffs off us. That's the thing that people don't realize, is these countries have tariffs on us. Raising the price and tariffs on whiskey over in France or in Europe. So President Trump says, okay, that's fine. 200% raise now on champagne and cheese. Deal with it. The thing is you also hear me often say this on the show, is that these countries are like silent torturers. They do everything in silence because they don't want the people to know how bad they really are. It's like the World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. They do everything in silence. They move in silence, and they don't broadcast anything because they don't want the people to have a bad perception of them. But Donald Trump doesn't care. Donald Trump doesn't care. He puts everything out in the public domain for the American people to know what's going on. And he tells it that way, which is why, you have people going crazy. It's why, you have the Marxist leftists going absolutely berserk. But there's tariffs on us from France. There's tariffs on us from all these other countries, UK, Canada. There's tariffs on us, but the people don't know because, like I say, they're silent torturers. They get away with it. Donald Trump doesn't care. He puts it out there in the public domain for all to see, and you guys make your judgment yourself. He doesn't care really what the other people think. He is truly America first. He's a peacemaker. He's a deal maker. You see what happened this week with Russia and Ukraine. He puts together a peace deal. Ukraine now all of a sudden in favor of a peace deal. Donald Trump presumably talks to Vladimir Putin and says, let's get this deal done. And Vladimir Putin says, yeah, that's fine. We'll do a temporary ceasefire. I'm skeptical of it, but I want something permanent. For those of you guys who joined us the other night when I did a whole segment on NATO and what we've done, we've pretty much gotten Ukraine into this war. I mean, they've gotten themselves into it, but we've helped stoke the fire. Since 1990, we've continued to add countries to NATO, adding, up until 2023 with and 2022 with Finland and Denmark. We've gotten them into this war. We've continued to add countries into NATO. James Baker made a deal with Mikhail Gorbachev in 1990 that they would not move further east than Germany. They did just the opposite. They continued to push and push and push. And Vladimir Putin bitched and complained about it all along the way. You guys lied to me. You guys lied to me. You guys lied to me. In 2007, came out and said it publicly. You guys lied to me. You said you were never pushing further east. And all you guys have continued to do in NATO is continue to push east. So he had enough. we're literally pushing towards putting weapons on his border when we told him 30 plus years ago that that was it. Yet we've continued to break the deal along the way each and every time we add another country to NATO. So who's to blame? Is it Vladimir Putin's fault for having enough? And Zelensky? Now, it's a whole situation. It's a lot more complex than that. But after the failed Afghanistan withdrawal, Vladimir Putin says, oh, well, you know what? The United States is probably not going to do anything. So I'm going to go into Ukraine and take back my territory. Now, at the same time, Zelensky's saying, well, we want to be in NATO. So now he's stoking that fire. And what is Vladimir Putin supposed to think? Now, the Marxist lefts will say, I'm a Russian agent. I'm a Russian this, I'm a Russian that. Or anyone who speaks the way I'm speaking right now is a Russian agent. I've never been to Russia. I've maybe had one or two Russian friends in my life. I have no association with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, I've never taken a payment from Russia, any sort of advertising money from Russia or anything like that. This is just me speaking as a layman and speaking on the weeks and weeks of research that I've done on this. So Zelensky says he wants in NATO. So what is he supposed to think now? For the last 30 plus years, America's lied to him, NATO has lied to him, and continued to push further east towards his country. Zelensky calls and says, I want in NATO. Is Putin supposed to sit back and say, that's fine, continue to push up inside of my country, on the borders of my country? Is he supposed to sit back and lay down taking it? I don't know any world leader with a pair who's going to do that. As a president of a country, you have the right and you have the duty to protect the sanctuary and safety of your country. So who's to say at any given point Ukraine gets into NATO and wants to start a war with Russia? Now all of a sudden, it's like a game of Stratego where you've got your country surrounded by an army of 30 different countries. So what was Vladimir Putin supposed to do? Was he supposed to just lay down and take it, as I just said? Or was he supposed to defend his country as you're supposed to do as president? Now, I'm not sycophanting for Vladimir Putin. I'm not saying he's a good guy by any means. I'm saying looking at it from a perspective, an independent perspective, because I think in the beginning we were all in favor of Ukraine. We were all in favor of protecting Ukraine because we didn't realize what was really happening. So I think in the beginning, we're all in favor of it. But then as time went on and you see what's happening and the fire stoking and the billions of dollars being poured into this war and the people dying and dying and dying, and then you start hearing that Ukraine's winning this war, which was never true, not even possible to be true. And you've got guys like Doug McGregor, who I've had on this show, come out and say that. And he's accused of being a Russian agent. No, it's speaking at it as a layman, as a professional, as someone who's seen this before. But no, you're automatically a Russian agent. You work for Russia. You're an agent of Russia. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So now Putin is okay with the ceasefire. Okay, but he wants a long-term one. Zelensky's saying now we won't recognize any Russian territory that you've taken for us. So this man continues to be like he's like the little chihuahua. And you got a little chihuahua who's sitting behind a glass door of your house, behind a screen, and the big old pit bull pulls up, or the St. Bernard pulls up, and that little chihuahua just keeps barking because he knows there's a door in between the two of them, and he ain't ever getting them. And the door swings out, so the pit bull can't push in. That's exactly what Zelensky's doing because he knows he's going to get away with it. He knows nations like the UK, he knows the European Union are all going to protect him. That's why he's doing it. So he's going to sit there and run his mouth. But the only problem is America's not on his side anymore. And it's not just Donald Trump and the administration. It's the American people. You go look at the numbers of the people who have support for Ukraine and support for Zelensky. They're going through the floor, and they're going quick. And Donald Trump's approval rating is going the opposite way. Because I think people, for the first time, are opening their eyes to what has been fed to us, the deception that has been fed to us, the lies that have been fed to us, and we've continued to stoke this war with innocent Ukrainians dying. Why? Why are we doing that? We don't have enough problems here at home. All the issues we have here at home, I say it every day. We have a war that needs to be fought right here at home, and it's on our southern border. And you know what? It's the first time we can win a war since maybe World War II. It's a war that we can win, and it's a war that's worth having because they say 100,000 people die every year of a drug overdose. It's hundreds of thousands because that 100,000 only takes into account the people who are autopsied that you can prove died of a drug overdose. It doesn't take into account the probably hundreds of other thousands who never get autopsied, the people who never find out how their kids really died because they knew it was a drug overdose, but they never cared to do an autopsy because they wanted to get it over with and bury their loved one. Hundreds of thousands. It shouldn't even be one person. But that's a war that's worth fighting. That's a war that's worth going to fight against the drug cartels and putting some weapons on them and launching some drones on them, on these drug facilities, these underground tunnels, these bunkers that these people, and you see, they know Donald Trump is coming. The New York Times had an interview last week with the drug cartelman, and he's terrified. The man said he doesn't leave his house anymore because he's scared that he's going to be lit up once he leaves the house. And I think that's what needs to be happening. Now, I'm not saying boots on the ground in Mexico, but if you send in a few drones, I mean, hell, we had no problem using a Sidewinder missile, a few $100,000 Sidewinder missile to take down that damn balloon from China after it traveled over the whole continental United States. We finally shoot it down off the coast of Myrtle Beach. And those things are about, I think, $700,000, $750,000. We had no problem doing that. Let's send some missiles into these drug factories. What is Mexico going to do? The problem is Mexico's government kind of has their hands tied because if they go after the drug cartels, these guys are ruthless. They go to kill their families. They kill everyone that's associated with them. And they run everything. In a lot of cases, there's money being kicked back and funneled to these presidents. So, yes, their hands are tied, but they're part of the corruption as well. Kelly Song, the criminals need to be made afraid of the consequences of their action. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And we may finally see it happen with Donald Trump as our president because it's never been done before. These folks, we've never put hands on any of these people. They've been allowed to do whatever they want, human traffic, drug traffic, whatever they want. And I've only talked about the drug trafficking, and I haven't even started on the human trafficking. That's for a whole different day. But, I mean, they're literally human trafficking women and children, raped along the way. There's nothing hyperbolic about this. This is what it is. But our politicians have allowed this to happen because we've turned over operational control of our southern border to the Mexicans, to the Mexican cartels. We've turned over control. They run the border. They own the border. Whatever they want comes through, and vice versa. Whatever they want to bring to the other side goes through, and we don't do anything about it. Some of these people, I'm told by people who have actually paid, are paying $25,000 and $30,000, upwards even to $40,000 to come from Mexico to America. And that's the cartels getting these money. Now, you do the math, folks. Under Joe Biden, you had thousands of them coming through a day. So even at 1,000 a day, at $40,000 a person, you do that math. These people don't even need to sell drugs because they make enough money on human trafficking. But it's just so easy for them to continue to push their drugs and sell their drugs that they say, hell, why not? Let's do it. We've got a double-end business here. Let's sell drugs and human traffic. Why not? You'll get away with it. Let's continue to do it. So that's the issue. And the reason why, as you heard me say before getting into media, I spent years running political campaigns. And one of the guys I worked for was a congressman. He said to me, think about it. If you fix all the problems, what are you going to run on when you run for your re-election next time? And it's true. It's the reason why President Bush never fixed the border. Because then the Republicans can never run on it again. And it's the same way the Democrats don't want the poor out of poverty. Because if they get out of poverty and they realize the wealth that can be made out there, they'll never vote Democrat again. And that was another thing that was taught to me by this congressman that I used to work for. If you take the people out of the ghetto, if you take these people out of the projects, and they realize the lies that they've been fed for the last however many years they've been living there, they'll never vote Democrat again. And truer words have never been spoken. And you see it firsthand. But this time around, folks, in this election, 2024, was the first time you saw these people realize that the Democrats have been feeding them lies for years, literally for years. But they're finally waking up, I think. I think Americans are finally waking up to, you know, the reality of what's going on here and what's going on in this country. So that's it for us tonight. I think we're taking off tomorrow. We're heading over to Ireland for a few days to celebrate the holiday. Maybe go visit Rosie O'Donnell, see how she's doing, how her mental health is doing. Hopefully she's doing better over there because she wasn't doing well in America. A few times you see her open wounds all over her face and all that nasty stuff. So we'll see you back here very, very soon. I hope you guys all have a great night. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you back here, as I said, very, very soon. I think we'll probably see you on Monday. So have a great one, folks. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all those who celebrate. And we appreciate you guys tuning in each and every night. And as you've heard me say, we're now on YouTube. So if you can join us on YouTube, we're trying to, you know, grow our channel up over there at The Great America Show on YouTube, at The Great America Show on YouTube. If you can follow us over there, if you can tune in and watch us over there, you know, we greatly appreciate it. Like I said, we're trying to grow our channels over there. We're continuing to grow our Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I ask you to follow me at John Fawcett NY. And on Truth Social at John Fawcett, but most importantly on YouTube, if you can, at The Great America Show, and join us each and every night there, or you can continue to join us on Rumble, whatever's easier for you guys. I guess it works for me as well. So, folks, we'll see you back here very, very soon. Have a great weekend. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of those who celebrate.